Hi everyone, this is Libby, and today we are going to look at part 4 of the Hidden Sword, the 7 Noahide Laws. Ezekiel 33:6. But if the watchman sees the sword coming and shall not blow the ram's horn, and the people shall not be warned, and the sword comes and takes any being from among them, he is taken away in his crookedness, and his blood I require at the watchman's hand. Today I will regretfully read a rather very disturbing article written by Bill Dannemeyer, husband of Dr. Lorraine Day, who served as U.S. Congressman from 1979 to 1992. Here's an excerpt. He said, "Even worse, I was in the House chamber the very day that it was passed, voting on other legislation, yet I, as a U.S. Congressman, had no knowledge that it had been passed or even that it was to be brought up for a vote. How could this be?" So we are going to hear from Bill Dannemeyer and take his word as written and as read. So for him to sound the alarm is highly valued. And I pray that you sit and be still and listen to his words, for those words may save your very life. Before getting into the article, I want to set the stage of the perspective of the amount of Chabad Lubavitch centers that are worldwide. Now keep in mind, this I have found sadly is just a small representation of the quantity of these centers. This is just a snapshot, if you will, of the Chabad Lubavitch centers that promote the 7 Noahide Laws and their yeshivas, their schools that teach the Babylonian Talmud, doctrine of men or doctrines of men, which has nothing to do with the biblical Torah, Yahweh's word. Chabad Lubavitch sect equates essentially to those quote-unquote scribes and Pharisees of Yahusha's day that he rebuked. This is in no way an anti-Semitic teaching that we are about to review. This is listening to a congressman tell his story, the day that this law was passed, and him being present on that very day. So these are just a snapshot, a small representation of the Chabad Lubavitch centers in the USA, and the link is below. Also in Europe, also in Canada, also in Australia and New Zealand and the Middle East, also in Asia, also in Central and South America, also in Africa. Now for the reading of quote-unquote, "Now the Government Can Legally Kill Christians" by Bill Dannemeyer, husband of Dr. Lorraine Day, U.S. Congressman that served from 1979 to 1992. Warning: some of the quotes from the Talmud within this letter are blasphemous and are only read to inform true believers of what the synagogue of Satan believe. They are being verbalized only as a watchman sounding the shofar of the approaching enemy. This enemy will soon directly face Yahushua HaMashiach, Jesus the Messiah, when he returns. Now the government can legally kill Christians. This is an article written by Bill Dannemeyer, husband of Dr. Lorraine Day. He served as U.S. Congressman from 1979 to 1992. Your U.S. government can now legally kill Christians for the crime of worshiping Jesus Christ. A diabolic deception has been perpetrated on the American people by their own leaders, senators and congressmen, who have sold their soul to the devil. On March 5, 1991, in the House of Representatives, and March 7, 1991, in the U.S. Senate, without any knowledge of or input by the people of the United States, U.S. senators and congressmen passed a law that is so outrageous and frankly unconstitutional that it forces the American people to be bound by a set of monstrous rules called the Noahide Laws. Rules that make the belief in Jesus Christ a crime punishable by decapitation by guillotine. On March 20, 1991, President George H.W. Bush, a supposed Christian, signed the bill into law. Parentheses, Deanna's note, President George W. Bush follows in his father's footsteps, and it has a link to see a free press, a free pass. Before you respond, no, that cannot be, not in our free country, let me explain. The passage of this law, H.J. Resolution 104, House Joint Resolution 104, is especially troublesome to me because I was a member of the U.S. House of Representatives at the time it was passed. Even worse, I was in the House chamber that very day that it was passed, voting on other legislation. Yet I, as a U.S. Congressman, had no knowledge that it had been passed or even that it was to be brought up for a vote. How could this be? How could the deception be so pervasive that most of us who had sworn to uphold our country's constitution, particularly those of us, parentheses, few indeed, who really took our position seriously as the protectors of the people, could be totally in the dark regarding the content of this bill and its passage by the leaders of this country by treachery and deceit? Here's how it happened. On January 31, 1991, an innocuous-sounding resolution was introduced designating March 26, 1991 as Education Day USA, quote unquote. It was purposely, given this name to deceive the American people. It was, in fact, a double deception, because not only did the resolution have nothing to do with quote unquote education, it was also deceptively billed as a vehicle for recognizing the 89th birthday of Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. But in truth, the resolution was nothing less than a secret, underhanded plot to control the American people by the Noahide Laws, a subterfuge for the elimination of Christianity, the elimination of all Christians, and the enslavement of all remaining Gentiles. The resolution, first introduced by Minority Leader Representative Robert H. Mitchell of Illinois, was then referred to the House Post Office and Civil Service Committee. Early in March 1991, 225 members of the House had signed on as co-sponsors of this resolution, but it is highly doubtful they were given the full text of the document. They were probably told only that it was a resolution in honor of Rabbi Schneerson's birthday. Most likely, they had no knowledge that the treacherous Noahide Laws were a silent attachment. I was not one of the co-sponsors. The committee referred this resolution to the House for a vote on March 5, 1991. But here is where the real treachery begins. The record states that the House of Representatives passed this resolution by unanimous consent, quote unquote. But what the average American does not know is that, quote unquote, unanimous consent is a euphemism for getting a bill passed, quote unquote, under the radar, with almost no one present to vote and with no record of who voted or how they voted. A congressman's ears prick up when he hears the words unanimous consent, quote unquote, because he is aware that this may be a signal for skullduggery. And in this case, it most certainly was. On the day this resolution was passed, quote unquote, the entire membership of the House of Representatives had already been dismissed after having been told that the day's work, including all the voting, was over. We could all go home. It was then, after virtually all members had left, that the traitorous authors of this resolution brought it up for a vote on the House floor, with only 4 hand-picked members present. It was then deceitfully, quote unquote, passed by unanimous consent, quote unquote, on March 5th, 1991, by voice vote with almost no one there and no record made of their names or how they voted. 2 days later, on March 7th, 1991, the U.S. Senate passed the resolution by voice vote, also with no record recorded. On March 20th, 1991, it was signed by President George H.W. Bush and became Public Law 102.14. As you read on, you will discover the identity of the evil forces that have so much control over the U.S. government that they can accomplish these dastardly deeds under cover of darkness. This is the language of H.J. Resolution 104, 102nd Congress, First Session, H.J. Resolution 104, Joint Resolution to designate March 26, 1991 as Education Day USA, H.J. 104-EH, 102, 102nd Congress, First Session, H.J. Resolution 104. Joint Resolution to designate March 26, 1991 as, quote-unquote, Education Day, USA. Whereas Congress recognizes the historical tradition of ethical values and principles which are the basis of civilized society and upon which our great nation was founded. Did you hear that? Whereas these ethical values and principles have been the bedrock of society from the dawn of civilization, when they were known as the 7 Noahide Laws. Whereas without these ethical values and principles, the edifice of civilization stands in serious peril of returning to chaos. Whereas society is profoundly concerned with the recent weakening of these principles that has resulted in crises that beleaguer and threaten the fabric of civilized society. Whereas the justified preoccupation with these crises must not let the citizens of this nation lose sight of their responsibility to transmit these historical, ethical values from our distinguished past to the generations of the future. Whereas the Lubavitch movement has fostered and promoted these ethical values and principles throughout the world. Whereas Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, leader of the Lubavitch movement, is, in bold letters, universally respected and revered, and his 89th birthday falls on March 26, 1991. Whereas, in tribute to this great spiritual leader, the quote-unquote, the Rebbe, this, his 90th year, will be seen as one of quote-unquote, education and giving, the year in which we turn to education and charity to return the world to the moral and ethical values contained in the 7 Noahide Laws. And whereas this will be reflected in an international scroll of honor signed by the President of the United States and other heads of state. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled that March 26, 1991, the start of the 90th year of Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, leader of the worldwide Lubavitch movement, is designated as quote-unquote Education Day, USA. The President is requested to issue a proclamation calling upon the people of the United States to observe such day with appropriate ceremonies and activities. Passed the House of Representatives, March 5, 1991. Attest, clerk, end. The Lubavitch movement mentioned in H.J. Resolution 104 began in the late 18th century and is the largest branch of Orthodox Hasidic Judaism. One of its prime goals is the enforcement of the Noahide Laws on all humanity. The words, quote-unquote, 7 Noahide Laws are mentioned twice in this resolution, but completely missing from this resolution are the following. 1. What is the specific language of these 7 Noahide laws? 2. Who drafted these 7 Noahide laws and where did they come from? 3. When were the 7 Noahide laws drafted? 4. Who defines what the 7 Noahide laws mean? What is the penalty for violating them? And who will administer them? 5. Man's 7 Noahide laws versus God's 10 commandments. 6. To whom do these 7 Noahide laws apply, and who makes that decision? Is H.J. Resolution 104 containing the 7 Noahide laws constitutional? Now, goes back to 1. What is the specific language of these 7 Noahide laws? The Encyclopedia of Judaism describes the Noahide laws. The words Noahide and Noachide are used interchangeably as follows. The Noahide laws, the Encyclopedia of Judaism, civil justice, the duty to establish a legal system, prohibition of blasphemy, which includes the bearing of false witness, the abandonment of idolatry, the prohibition of incest, including adultery and other sexual offenses, the prohibition of murder, also that of theft, the law against eating flesh, a limb, cut from a living animal, i.e. cruelty in any shape or form, and then Babylonian Talmud, I think it's Sanhedrin, it's S-A-N-H period, 56a, close paren. Before providing answers to the other 6 questions, I would like to describe my analysis of the process by which this resolution was adopted by Congress. When you initially read H.J. Resolution 104, it seems to be a vehicle for recognizing the 89th birthday and the beginning of the 90th year of Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, which fell on March 26, 1991. I have no recollection of anyone asking me to co-sponsor this resolution, so I am not familiar with what reasons were given to the House of Representative members to sign on as co-sponsors. The language of the resolution speaks for itself, but the consequences of their adoption is that the 7 Noahide laws have been recognized by the Congress of the United States and the President of America as, quote-unquote, the bedrock of society from the dawn of civilization. And the claim will be made that they are now the law of our land, the United States. Most Americans would be shocked to learn that the Babylonian Talmud, not the Old Testament, is the holiest book of Judaism and is the source of these 7 Noahide laws, which provide a specific penalty for violating any of these 7 Noahide laws, namely death by decapitation. Sanhedrin 57a is bracketed as the source. Make no mistake about it. What appeared to be nothing more than a recognition of the 89th birthday of Rabbi Schneerson and the establishment of Education Day in the United States will be claimed by the proponents of this resolution as the establishment of a law by which a Christian who worships Jesus Christ will be charged with idolatry and decapitation. Based on my 14 years of service in the House of Representatives, the process by which H.J. Resolution 104 was adopted was a complete disregard and purposeful circumvention of a very important basis on which representative government is founded, namely accountability to the people of America of how we conduct the people's business. Specifically, roll call votes are the means whereby members of Congress identify which laws have been passed and by whom. When laws and resolutions passed by unanimous consent, watch out. In this case, someone or some group wanted to hide the real purpose behind a seemingly innocuous birthday recognition of Rabbi Schneerson. I was not part of the discussion that led to the drafting and presentation of H.J. Resolution 104 to members of Congress, but based on my knowledge of how Congress works, this describes what most probably took place. Jews who, by their financial contributions to members of Congress, claim they control what Congress will or will not do. A look at the recent history of U.S. politics confirms this. Quote unquote, he who has the gold rules. Stephen Sizer, author of the book Christian Zionism, first published in 2004, states, quote, the Unity Coalition for Israel, UCFI, is probably the most recent network of Christian Zionists to be formed in the U.S., yet it is already the largest and most powerful. The UCFI was founded by Esther Levins, a Jew in Kansas in 1994, and now comprises a broad coalition of 200 different and autonomous Jewish and Christian organizations representing 40 million members who are dedicated to, quote unquote, a secure Israel. Their principal strategy is to lobby the U.S. media and political establishment to challenge what they term, quote unquote, disinformation and propaganda, and to express, quote unquote, the truth about Israel. The UCFI includes 3 of the largest Christian Zionist organizations, Bridges for Peace, the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem, and Christians for Israel. This coalition has a major influence on both the Republican and Democratic parties by providing the bulk of campaign funding to both sides. Aluf Ben, a spokesman for Shimon Peres, was quoted in the Haaretz, a leading newspaper in Israel, as claiming that 60%, that's 60% of all financial help to Democrats came from Jewish sources. According to the Washington Report on Middle East Affairs, quote, most pro-Israel fundraisers estimate that at least 60 to 90% of Democratic campaign funding comes from Jewish sources, which also supply perhaps 40% of Republican funding, end quote. Christian Zionists have also been influential in forging a closer relationship with Israel by facilitating solidarity pilgrimages and educational tours of the Holy Land, close quote. Page 215. Jewish lobbyists were successful in enlisting Minority Leader Congressman Bob Michael to be the chief sponsor of this resolution, purportedly to honor and recognize Rabbi Schneerson, the leader of the Lubavitch movement, on his 89th birthday. These lobbyists wanted to eliminate, for obvious reasons, any chance for discussion of the 7 questions written above in this report, specifically the Bible, with particular reference in this instance to the 10 Commandments written by God, is the source of the ethical values and principles which are the basis of civilized society, not the 7 Noahide Laws written by man. To avoid this debate and the record voted that would have followed, a strategy was devised to get Resolution 104 adopted by quote-unquote unanimous consent with no documentation that 99% of all House members were absent, and none of the 4 members that were present would be held accountable by a recorded vote. The Journal of the House of Representatives, JHR, parentheses, for March 5, 1991, on page 151, describes item 30.12 H Res period 95 unfinished business. This resolution commended the President and United States and allied military forces in the success of Operation Desert Storm. A recorded vote was taken and item 30.13 describes the count. Yeas 410, nays 8. My yes vote was among the 410. This page contains the name of each member present and how he or she voted. Item 30.14 on the next page, page 152 in parentheses of the JHR, recorded the announcement that when the House adjourns, it will meet on Wednesday, March 6th at 12 noon. This told all the members that there would be no more roll call votes on Tuesday, March 5th, that the day's business was over, and within minutes after this announcement, virtually all the members were off the House floor on their way home and totally unaware of anything thereafter that was brought up. Here is the subsequent record of what took place after the members were gone. Item 30.15 of the JHR was a routine announcement concerning recesses and a joint session with the President of the United States. But then, after almost everyone was gone for the day, item 30.16 on the agenda, HJ Resolution 104, the resolution in question was surreptitiously brought up on the House floor with only 4 members present who spoke on behalf of the resolution. This is how it occurred. Congressman Thomas Sawyer, Democrat, Ohio, the chairman of the Committee on Post Office and Civil Service, asked for unanimous consent, that's in quotes, to take up HJ Resolution 104. Congressman Thomas Ridge, Republican, Pennsylvania, reserved the right to object, but did not object. If he had objected, it would have stopped the process of unanimous consent. Instead, he acknowledged the work of Minority Leader Mitchell, who was the chief sponsor of this legislation, and he then yielded to parentheses Jewish, close parentheses, Congressman Benjamin Gilman, Republican, New York. Congressman Gilman spoke briefly, as did Minority Leader Mitchell. It appears likely that these 4 congressmen were the only ones present. After assisting with the underhanded passage of HJ Resolution 104, Congressman Thomas Ridge also subsequently assisted in the cover-up of the truth of 9/11, claiming that flight number 93 crashed in Pennsylvania, even though no parts of an airplane or passengers or baggage were ever found. From then on, Thomas Ridge's career blossomed. At the time of 9/11, Ridge was governor of Pennsylvania, 1995 to 2001, parentheses. But in 2003, Ridge was named the first secretary of the new Department of Homeland Security, parentheses, 2003 to 2005, close parentheses. After the tragic multiple shooting at Virginia Tech on April 16, 2007, Ridge became part of the committee to cover up what actually happened in that event. Continuing with the debacle of the Noahide Laws, quote-unquote Noahide Laws, passage, the Speaker, pro tempore, asked if there was any objection to the request from Congressman Sawyer. There was no objection. 30.16 Education Day, comma, U, period, S, capital U, period, capital S, period, capital A, period. On the motion of Mr. Sawyer, by unanimous consent, the Committee on Post Office and Civil Service was discharged from further consideration of the joint resolution, parentheses, HJ Resolution 104, close parentheses, to designate March 26, 1991 as, quote-unquote, Education Day, comma, USA, close quote. When said joint resolution was considered, read twice, ordered to be engrossed and read a third time, let me repeat that. When said joint resolution was considered, read twice, ordered to be engrossed and read a third time, was read a third time by title, and passed. A motion to reconsider the vote whereby said joint resolution was passed was by unanimous consent laid on the table. Ordered that the clerk request the concurrence of the Senate in said joint resolution. Their total remarks consumed no more than 4 or 5 minutes, and there was not even a mention of the 7 Noahide Laws. For the balance of the early evening, these routine, non-controversial items were considered by the quote-unquote House with only these 4 members present. Item 30.17, National Employ, the Older Worker Week. Item 30.18, Baltic Florida Day. Item 30.19, Leave of Absence. And item 30.20, Adjournment. The Jews claim that with their financial contributions, they have bought control of the U.S. Congress, and so they have. As proof of this statement, no one needs to search further than the blunt words of Israel Prime Minister Ariel Sharon uttered on October 3, 2001 to his colleague Shimon Peres. Every time we do something, you tell me America will do this and will do that. I want to tell you something very clear. Don't worry about American pressure on Israel. We, the Jewish people, control America, and the Americans know it. Close quote. Indeed, the Jews had, quote unquote, bought control of the House and Senate, which resulted in ignoring the whole concept of accountability that the presence of debate and a roll call vote accomplishes. Bringing up H.J. Resolution 104 for passage at a time when the process selected assured that no more than 4 members of the House of Representatives were present, each of whom was committed to the passage of H.J. Resolution 104, guaranteed that when the request for unanimous consent was expressed on the floor of the House, no one was around to object. And because no one objected, passage was obtained with no member having his or her vote recorded in favor of or against the resolution. By design, there was no roll call vote, and thus no member was held accountable for what Congress did. This is a prime example of the fraud perpetrated on the American people by their so-called representatives. The oft-quoted cliche is operating here. With friends like these, who needs enemies? 2. Who drafted these 7 Noahide laws and where did they come from? Dr. Eleazar Segal, a Jewish associate professor of theology at the University of Calgary, admits that history proves that the Talmud, Mishnah, a part of the Talmud, and the 7 Noahide laws are derived from Babylonian traditions that Jesus vehemently denounced because they nullified the teaching of Scripture. The Encyclopedia of Judaism identifies the Babylonian Talmud, parentheses, capital T period, capital B period, close parentheses, as the source of the Noahide laws. According to quote unquote secret societies and subversive movements, close quote, by Nesta Webster, the Talmud and the Kabbalah were derived from Jewish oral traditions, which the Jews claimed to have the same authority as the laws of Moses found in Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. The quote-unquote holiest books of Judaism are the Talmud, a compendium of over 100 quote-unquote books written by Pharisees and Jewish rabbis. That is the utter perversion of God's word. The Kabbalah, another Jewish quote-unquote holy book, is a book of witchcraft and licentious debauchery. Provisions of the Talmud, Genesis Rabbah 16:6, period. Sanhedrin 56 states that the 7 Noahide laws were commanded to Adam, yet there is nothing in the Bible to support this claim. The book, Judaism's Strange Gods by Michael A. Hoffman, parentheses 2000, close parentheses, describes how the Talmud specifically defines all non-Jews as non-human animals. It also distinguishes between actions by Jews against non-Jews from actions of non-Jews against Jews. Jews are clearly spoken of as superior to non-Jews. Hitting a Jew is the same as hitting God. Sanhedrin 58b, period. If a Gentile hits a Jew, the Gentile must be killed. Acceptable to cheat non-Jews. Sanhedrin 57a, a Jew need not pay a Gentile the wages owed him. Jews have superior legal status. Baba, comma, 37b, that's spelled capital B-A-B-A, and second word is capital K-A-M-M-A, 37b, period. Quote unquote. If an ox of an Israelite gores an ox of a Canaanite, quote, parentheses, Gentile, there is no liability. But if an ox of a Canaanite gores an ox of an Israelite, the payment is to be in full. Jews may steal from non-Jews. Baba Mezia, B-A-B-A, and then M-E-Z-I-A, 24a, if a Jew finds an object lost by a Gentile, it does not have to be returned. Parentheses, affirmed also in Baba Kama, that's K-A-M-M-A, 113b, period, close paren. Sanhedrin 76a, period, God will not spare a Jew who marries his daughter to an old man or takes a wife for his infant son or returns a lost article to a Gentile. Jews may rob and kill non-Jews. Sanhedrin 57a, period, when a Jew murders a Gentile, there will be no death penalty. What a Jew steals from a Gentile, he may keep. Baba, B-A-B-A, comma, capital K-A-M-M-A, 37b, period. The Gentiles are outside the protection of the law, and God has, quote unquote, exposed their money to Israel. Another quote, relying upon the code of Maimonides and the Halakha, the Gush Emunim leader, Rabbi Israel Ariel, stated, quote, a Jew who killed a non-Jew is exempt from human judgment and has not violated the religious prohibition of murder, close quote. Jews may lie, L-I-E, to non-Jews. Baba Kama, that's K-A-M-M-A, 113a, Jews may use lies, parentheses, and in quotes, subterfuges, close quote, and close paren, to circumvent a Gentile. Non-Jewish children are subhuman. Yebamoth, 98a, all Gentile children are animals. Abadah, Sarah, 36b, Gentile girls are in a state of niddah, filth, parentheses, and close parentheses, filth is in parentheses, from birth. Insults against Mary. Sanhedrin 106a says Jesus's mother was a whore. She was a descendant of princes and governors, played the harlot with carpenters. Also in footnote number 2, the Shabbath, S-H-A-B-B-A-T-H 104b of the Sonsino edition, that's capital S-O-N-C-I-N-O edition, it is stated that in the quote-unquote uncensored text of the Talmud, it is written that Jesus' mother, Miriam the hairdresser, quote-unquote, had sex with many men. Jesus is also described in the Talmud. By 1999, certain Orthodox Jewish organizations describe Jesus as a sorcerer and a demented sex freak. On the website of the Orthodox Jewish Chabad Lubavitch group, chabad.org, one of the largest and most powerful Jewish organizations in the world, and whose spiritual leader, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, whose birthday honoring was the false flag cover-up for signing into law the authority to murder Christians for worshiping Jesus Christ, we find the following statement accompanied by citations from the Talmud. Quote, the Talmud, parentheses, Babylonian edition, close parentheses, records other sins of, quote, Jesus the Nazarene, close quote. 1, quote, he and his disciples practiced sorcery and black magic, led Jews astray into idolatry, and were sponsored by foreign Gentile powers for the purpose of subverting Jewish worship. Parentheses, Sanhedrin 43a, close parentheses, period, close quote. 2, quote, he was sexually immoral, worshipped statues of stone, parentheses, a brick is mentioned, close parentheses, was cut off from the Jewish people for his wickedness, comma, and refused to repent, parentheses, Sanhedrin 107b, semicolon, Sotah, S-O-T-A-H, 47a, close parentheses, period, close quote. 3, quote, he learned witchcraft in Egypt, Shabbos 104b, that's in parentheses, and it's spelled capital S-H-A, B as in blue, O-S, 104, B as in blue, close parentheses, period, quote. And then in parentheses following is end quote from Chabad Lubavitch. More quotes from the Talmud about Jesus. Gittin, that's Gitten 57a, says Jesus is in hell being boiled in quote unquote hot excrement. Sanhedrin 43 says Jesus was executed because he practiced sorcery. Quote, it is taught that on the eve of Passover Jesus was hung, and 40 days before this the proclamation was made. Jesus is to be stoned to death because he has practiced sorcery and has lured the people to idolatry. ... He was an enticer, and of such thou shalt not pity or condone, period, close quote. Genocide advocated by the Talmud. Sopherim 15, Rule 10. That's capital SOFERIM 15, Rule 10, period. This is the saying of Rabbi Simon ben Yoha. That's Simon, could be Simone or Simon ben Yoha, capital YOHAI. Tob Shebe Goyim Harag. That's capital TOB, next word, SHEBE, next word, Goyim, GOYYIM, next word, HAROG, parentheses and quote, even the best of the Gentiles should all be killed. Let me repeat that quote, which is in parentheses. Even the best of the Gentiles should all be killed. This Talmudic passage has been concealed in some translations. The Jewish Encyclopedia states, quote, ... in the various versions, the reading has been altered. Quote, the best among the Egyptians, close quote, being generally substituted, close quote. In the Soncino version, that's capital SONCINO, colon, parentheses, the best of the heathens, close quote, and in parentheses, Monor, MONOR, tractates, TRACTATES, Sopherim, SOFERIM 41A-B, close parentheses. But, quote unquote, heathen is translated as, quote unquote, Gentile, parentheses, non-Jews, close parentheses, by the Jews. Talmudic doctrine, colon, non-Jews are not human. The Talmud specifically defines all who are not Jews as non-human animals and specifically dehumanizes Gentiles as not being descendants of Adam. Moses Maimonides, colon, advocate of extermination. The rabbinic teacher Moses Maimonides called the Rambam or Rambam, that's in quotes, it's capital RAMBAM, that's what they called Moses Maimonides, called the Rambam by the Jews, is revered in Judaism as supreme, quote unquote, sage of the highest stature. Quote, Moses Maimonides is considered the greatest codifier and philosopher in Jewish history. He is often affectionately referred to as the Rambam after the initials of his name and title, Rabbeinu Moshe ben Maimon, or Rabbi, Moses, son of Maimon. According to the introduction to the book Maimonides Principles, page 5, Maimonides spent 12 years extracting every decision and law from the Talmud and arranging them all into 14 systematic volumes. The work was finally completed in 1180 and was called Mishnah Torah, or quote-unquote Code of the Torah. Here is what Maimonides taught concerning the saving of the life of a Gentile or Christian, and even Jews who dare to deny the quote-unquote divine inspiration of the Talmud. Accordingly, if we see an idolater, parentheses, Gentile, close parentheses, being swept away or drowning in the river, we should not help him, close quote. Maimonides ruled that it is a Jewish court, or a court appointed by Jewish authority, that enforces obedience and passes judgment on Gentiles, as well as promulgating legislation by court order for that purpose. Maimonides further decreed that any non-Jewish nation, quote, not subject to our jurisdiction, close quote, Tahat, T-A-H-A-H-T, Yaduni, Y-A-D-E-I-N-U, close parentheses, will be the target of Jewish holy war. These courts are to be convened allegedly under the quote-unquote Noahide Laws, prescriptions against idolatry supposedly based on the covenant with Noah. That was in parentheses. But there is nothing in the Bible to support this claim. This claim is a preposterous fraud, all caps, hyphen, and a sign of the Antichrist. Professor Easterly of the Southern University Law Center, a Jewish legal expert, has diabolically compared H.J. Resolution 104 to the quote-unquote first rays of dawn, which quote-unquote evidence the rising of a still unseen sun, S-U-N. The Jewish Encyclopedia envisages a Noahide regime as a possible world order, parentheses, one world government, close parentheses, immediately preceding the, quote, universal reign of the Talmud, close quote, a terrifying prospect indeed. These provisions of the Talmud, the same Talmud that is the source of the Noahide Laws, make very clear what the proponents of H.J. Resolution 104 used the subterfuge of obtaining the passage of this legislation without any debate or a record vote. H.J. Resolution 104 was fraudulently and deceitfully passed by quote-unquote unanimous consent when no one was around to consider and discuss the provisions of the Talmud. If these had been brought to the attention of the members of Congress, H.J. Resolution 104 would never have been passed. The Chabad Lubavitch falsely claims that God gave the 7 Noahide laws at Mount Sinai with the intention that the children of Israel should keep them and teach them to the Gentiles. This is a deliberate lie. There is absolutely no support in the Bible for this fraudulent claim. The source of these 7 Noahide laws was not, in all caps, N-O-T, was not, as the Jews have claimed, directions from God to Adam or Noah or Moses. Their source is the oral traditions of the Pharisees that began in Babylon after the Israelites were captured in 586 BC. Over 600 years later, after the Pharisees had killed Christ and the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 AD, these oral traditions were written down and became the Babylonian Talmud. When were the 7 Noahide laws drafted? The exodus of the Israelites from Egypt took place in about 1445 BC. Moses died in 1405 BC. Shortly after beginning the 40-year wandering in the desert, God wrote the 10 Commandments on 2 tablets with his own finger, and they are recorded in Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 through 17. The ancient nation of Israel reached its height of power and prestige during the reign of Solomon from 960 to 930 BC. After Solomon, most of the Israelite kings were corrupt or inept, and the northern 10 tribes of Israel were taken captive by Assyria in 721 BC. The southern tribes, Judah and Benjamin, were expelled to Babylon in about 586 BC, after which the Talmud oral traditions, specifically including the 7 Noahide laws, were produced in Babylon during this period. Fourth question. Who defines what the Noahide laws mean? What is the penalty for violating them? Who will administer them? A Jewish website, www.noahidenations.com, states that the worship of any deity other than God, which includes Jesus Christ, is idolatry. The penalty for idolatry is decapitation. Sorry, lost my place. The Noahide laws will be administered by a restored Sanhedrin, the ruling body of Jews that found Jesus Christ guilty of blasphemy on the accusation of 2 false witnesses, according to Matthew 26:60. Under the courts of law, quote unquote, section of the Noahide laws, this is stated, quote, a person may be convicted in a Noahide court on the testimony of single witness, but only if the witness is known to be righteous. Let me repeat that, quote unquote. A person may be convicted in a Noahide court on the testimony of single witness, but only if the witness is known to be righteous. 5, the fifth point. Man's, quote unquote, is in quotes, man's 7 Noahide laws versus God's 10 commandments. It is God's law, the 10 commandments, that is the basis of civilization, not the Noahide laws written by the killers of Christ, the Pharisees. The 10 commandments are found in Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 through 17, and were written by God in his own finger on 2 tables of stone. To show their permanence, God wrote these commandments shortly after the Exodus that began in 1445 BC. Although false claims have been made by the Jews that the origin of the Noahide laws began with Adam and included Noah and Moses, Jewish professor Segal stated that the evidence of history proves that the origin of the 7 Noahide laws is the Babylonian traditions. The captivity and removal to Babylon of the northern tribes, Judah and Benjamin, occurred in 586 BC. In other words, at least 859 years after God gave the 10 commandments to mankind on Mount Sinai. The Pharisees, the cultural progeny of the killers of Christ, in exile in Babylon, drafted the 7 Noahide laws, which were written by man, quote unquote, not by God. In examining the history of the 7 Noahide laws, no claim is made that God wrote them or that he wrote them with his own finger as he did the 10 commandments. I'll read that again. In examining the history of the 7 Noahide laws, no claim is made that God wrote them or that he wrote them with his own finger as he did the 10 commandments. 10 commandments in the Ark of the Covenant. The 2 tablets of stone containing the 10 commandments written by God were housed inside the Ark of the Covenant, parentheses, 2 Chronicles chapter 5, verse 10, 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 9, close parentheses. The ordinances written by Moses were housed in a side pocket on the outside of the Ark of the Covenant, parentheses, Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 26, close parentheses. When Jesus died on the cross, he abolished the ordinances written by Moses, parentheses, housed on the outside of the Ark of the Covenant, close parentheses, including the sanctuary-related ordinances that looked forward to the sacrificial lamb, Jesus Christ, and thus were abolished when these were fulfilled with the crucifixion of Christ. But the ordinances did not include the 10 commandments. The ordinances were totally separate from the 10 commandments. That paragraph is very important, so I'm reading it again. When Jesus died on the cross, he abolished the ordinances written by Moses, parentheses, housed on the outside of the Ark of the Covenant, close parentheses, including the sanctuary-related ordinances that looked forward to the sacrificial lamb, Jesus Christ, and thus were abolished when these were fulfilled with the crucifixion of Christ. But the ordinances did not include the Ten Commandments. The ordinances were totally separate from the Ten Commandments. No trace of a claim by anyone has been found which asserts that the 7 Noahide laws were inside or on the outside of the Ark of the Covenant or anywhere during the Israelites' sojourn in the wilderness. This fact is not surprising since the 7 Noahide laws were first developed as a part of the Babylonian Talmud long after the exile of the Israelites to Babylon in 586 BC. Exodus chapter 20, verses 3 through 17 contains the Ten Commandments. Thou shalt not have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. 5. They shall not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and the Lord is spelled with all caps, made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and all that in them is, and rested the 7th day. Wherefore the Lord, caps, blessed the Sabbath and hallowed it. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. So that last was verse 17. What God gave in these texts to the children of Israel was clearly conditional. In the 23rd chapter of Matthew, Jesus properly brought to account the scribes and Pharisees for not keeping the covenant, the 10 commandments. No better proof of the total rejection of the covenant was the actions of the Jews to call for the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. The only reason the Pharisaical leaders of the Jews did not directly order Jesus' death was that they did not have the legal authority to do so. They were under Roman rule, and only a Roman ruler could order the death penalty for any person. So they pressured Pilate, parentheses, who said, quote unquote, I find no fault in this, quote unquote, man, parentheses, Jesus, close parentheses, to order the Jews' murderous demand. Many Christian leaders claim that the 10 commandments were done away with at the cross, and only those commandments that Christ specifically mentioned in the New Testament are to be kept by quote-unquote New Testament Christians. This is their justification for ignoring the 4th commandment, which is God's command that we keep holy the Sabbath or Shabbat day, which is referred to in our day and age in parentheses it says Saturday, as the Sabbath. But in the following analysis, you will see that all, that's in caps, ALL, 10 commandments, including the parentheses Saturday, close parentheses Sabbath commandment, are given in the New Testament. In addition, Jesus himself kept the seventh-day Sabbath, and Jesus was, capital not, N-O-T, a Jew. Jesus is God, and God is not Jewish. The Christian Patriot Association of Boring, Oregon published this document, quote, the law of God, close quote, which contains a side-by-side scriptural reference of the Old and New Testament concerning the Ten Commandments. The law of God, Old Testament, thou shalt have no other gods before me. That was number 1. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. 2. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me, and keep my commandments. 3. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor, and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath and hallowed it. 5. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. 6. Thou shalt not kill. 7. Thou shalt not commit adultery. 8. Thou shalt not steal. 9. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. 10. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. See Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 through 18. I will not alter nor break the thing that is gone out of my lips. See, in parentheses, Psalm 89:34. And then in New Testament 1, quote, thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve, close quote, Matthew 4, verse 10. 2, quote, little children, keep yourselves from idols. For as much then as we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the Godhead is like unto gold, or silver, or stone, graven by art and man's device. Close quote. 1 John chapter 5, verse 21, semicolon, Acts chapter 17, verse 29. Third, quote, that the name of God and his doctrine be not blasphemed. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 1. 4, quote, pray ye that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. Close quote. Quote, the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. Therefore the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath. Quote, close quote, unquote. For he spoke in a certain place of the seventh day on this wise, and God did rest the seventh day from all his works. Close quote, quote. There remaineth therefore a keeping of a Sabbath to the people of God, for he that is entered into his rest, he also hath ceased from his own works, as God did from his. close quote, quote. For by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are in earth, close quote. Matthew 24:20, comma, Mark 2, verses 27, semicolon, and 28, semicolon, Hebrews 4, chapter 4, verse 4, 4, verse 4, verse 9 and 10, margin, semicolon, Colossians chapter 1, verse 16. 5. Honor thy father and thy mother, quote unquote, Matthew chapter 19, verse 19. Thou shalt not kill, quote unquote, Romans 13:9. 7. Thou shalt not commit adultery, quote unquote, Matthew 19:18. Thou shalt not steal, quote unquote, Romans 13:9. 9. Quote unquote, thou shalt not bear false witness, Romans 13, verse 9. 10th, quote unquote, thou shalt not covet, Romans 7, verse 7. After his death, quote unquote, do we then make void the law through faith? God forbid. Yea, we establish the law, close quote, Romans 3, verse 31. Quote, they, ... rested the Sabbath day according to the commandment, close quote, Luke 23, verses 54 through 56. Subtitle, Sabbath in the New Earth. Quote, for as the new heavens and the new earth, which I will make, shall remain before me, saith the Lord, so shall your seed and your name remain. And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord. Close quote. Isaiah 66, verses 22, 23. Also see Mark chapter 2, verse 27-28. For additional copies, complete catalog, or additional information, contact Christian Patriot Association, P.O. Box 596, Boring, Oregon, zip code 97009, phone number, parentheses 503-668-4941. The words of Jesus in Matthew chapter 5, verses 17 through 19, completely disprove the idea that his death on the cross repealed the Ten Commandments. Quote unquote from the NIV. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter nor the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Anyone who breaks one of these, the least of these commandments, and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. Next paragraph. When Jesus used the word quote unquote fulfill, he meant to convey the idea that his life was a living example of the Ten Commandments. To reach the conclusion that his death on the cross repealed the Ten Commandments would necessitate changing the verb quote unquote fulfill to quote unquote abolished, in total conflict with the negative expressly stated by Jesus in the use of this verb. Jesus said, quote unquote, I have not come to abolish them, parentheses, the Ten Commandments, close parentheses, close quote. Next paragraph. In Matthew 19, verse 18 through 19, Jesus mentions commandments 5 through 10. These 6 commandments reveal how man is to relate to his fellow man. Next paragraph. In Mark 2, verses 27 through 28, Jesus used these words to make clear that he not only recognizes and affirms the 4th commandment, but he has complete authority over it. It reads in verse 27 of Mark chapter 2, the Sabbath was made for man, parentheses, all mankind, anthropos in Greek, the root word for anthropology, the study of humanity, close paren, and not for the Sabbath. Verse 28, therefore the Son of Man is also Lord of the Sabbath, parentheses, this is the 7th day, parentheses, Saturday, close parentheses, Sabbath, close parentheses. In Matthew 4:10, Jesus affirms the first commandment with these words, thou shalt worship. Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve. The Apostle John, Mark, and Paul made specific references to the second and third commandments in 1 John 5:21, Acts 17, verse 29, and 1 Timothy 6:1. Archaeologists have searched for many centuries in the Christian era to find the Ark of the Covenant, yet no one has claimed to have found it. In Revelation 11:19, John's vision revealed that the Ark of his covenant was still in the heavenly temple of God. Here are John's words. Then the temple of God was opened in heaven, and the Ark of his covenant was seen in his temple. And there was lightnings, noise, thunderings, and earthquakes, and great hail. The Ark of the Covenant has only one item in it, the Ten Commandments. God is telling us through John the Revelator that the Ten Commandments are still operative now and will never be abolished. The reason heaven will be heaven is that the Ten Commandments will be in the heart of everyone there. The sixth question. To whom do the Noahide laws apply, and who makes that decision? Proponents of the Noahide laws claim that the Ten Commandments were given exclusively to the nation of Israel, who they incorrectly refer to as quote-unquote Jews, and the Noahide laws were given to govern all other persons, quote-unquote non-Jews or Goyim-Gentiles. Scriptural texts that are quoted to support this false view are Exodus 19, verse 3 through 6, and Exodus 20, verse 1 through 2, and Exodus 3, verse 17. But even an cursory examination of these texts will prove this claim to be utter nonsense. Exodus 19, verses 3 through 6. And Moses went up unto God, and the Lord called unto him out of the mountain, saying, Thus shalt thou say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, Ye have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings, and brought you unto myself. Now therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine, and ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and an holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel. The children of Israel were then, and are now, of no particular ethnicity. The term, quote-unquote, children of Israel, close quote, refers to the true followers of Jesus Christ. Exodus 20, verse 1 through 2. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Egypt in the Bible is symbolic for sin. See Revelation chapter 11, verse 8. Next, Exodus 3, verse 17. And I have said, I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt into the land of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, unto a land flowing with milk and honey. There is no language in any of these texts of Scripture, or for that matter, any other text of Scripture in the entire Bible to support the claim that the Noahide laws were given to govern all non-Jews and the Ten Commandments were given only to Jews. The assertion that the Ten Commandments were given only to the Israelites of old and supposedly the Jews of today, close parentheses, is contrary to the Word of God and completely ignores the truth of the New Testament. Jesus made this clear in Matthew 5:17. Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. Jesus, quote unquote, fulfilled the law by showing us how we must keep the law. Paul in Galatians 3:16, 29 made the same point. Galatians 3:16, now to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. He saith not, and to seeds, plural, as of many, but as of one, and to thy seed, which is Christ. Galatians 3:29, and if ye be Christ, then are ye Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise? The true followers of Jesus Christ, wherever they may be found, are the quote-unquote seed of Abraham and heirs to the promise. Point 7 is HJ Resolution 104, containing the 7 Noahide Laws constitutional. The First Amendment the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution provides, among other things, that, quote, unquote, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, ... close quote. HJ Resolution 104 fraudulently claims that the 7 Noahide Laws are the quote-unquote bedrock of society from the dawn of civilization. This is a deliberate lie and seeks to rewrite history. The 7 Noahide Laws were written by Jewish Pharisees and rabbis about 586 BC, when the tribes of Judah and Benjamin were in exile in Babylon. The 10 Commandments were written by God in his own finger in stone approximately 1445 BC at Mount Sinai. The 10 Commandments were written by God over 850 years before the 7 Noahide Laws were written by man. The 10 Commandments, not the fraudulent Noahide Laws, are the generally acknowledged bedrock of society from the dawn of civilization, but have not been designated as law by an act of Congress. Let me reread that sentence. The 10 Commandments, not the fraudulent Noahide Laws, are the generally acknowledged bedrock of society from the dawn of civilization, but have not been designated as law by any act of Congress. Because the 7 Noahide Laws are obviously religious in their purpose, any act of Congress that attempts to establish them as the bedrock of society from the dawn of civilization is clearly religious and in a complete and total violation of the First Amendment. Conclusion. The Noahide Laws have nothing to do with Noah or Adam or God. In about 1600 BC, God directed Noah to build an ark and save his family and the animal population of the world from the flood which destroyed life on the surface of the earth. Over 1,000 years later, in 586 BC, during the Babylonian captivity, diabolical laws were developed by the Pharisees and Jewish rabbis who sought to title these laws with a name that would give them legitimacy. The purpose of the Jews in developing the Noahide Laws is to rule over all of the non-Jews in the world without having to suffer a mass conversion of these people to Judaism, which they fear would dilute the cultural cohesion of the Jewish population. The rabbis who produced the Talmud and the Noahide Laws claim that the Noahide Laws are the universal way of reaching God, even though they privately state the Noahide Laws are only for the quote-unquote Gentiles. Behind this false claim is the true belief of the rabbis that it is the means whereby the rabbis are seen as God and are to be worshipped as God by Gentiles. The Noahide Laws are to become the national, though undeclared, religion of America. The First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution prohibits Congress from passing a law which establishes a religion for the United States of America. If another 9/11 type quote-unquote terrorist incident takes place and martial law is declared, it is likely that the claim would be made that since the Noahide Laws have been recognized by Congress as the quote-unquote basis of our civilization, close quote, and that according to the third Noahide Law, anyone who worships Jesus Christ violates this law, he or she may be characterized as a terrorist. Then the Talmudic penalty for violating any of the Noahide Laws, namely decapitation, would be enforced. No American should underestimate the ferocity of the commitment of the Zionist Jews to control the entire political system of the world through the one world government now being created, and in doing and in so doing administer quote unquote justice as they define it. The main goal of the Zionist Jews and their New World Order is exactly the same as it was when Jesus was on earth, to exterminate Christ and his followers. Nothing has changed. Let me read that last sentence again in closing. The main goal of the Zionist Jews and their New World Order is exactly the same as it was when Jesus was on earth, to exterminate Christ and his followers. Nothing has changed. And it closed with the home page of takebackourrights.org. In conclusion, I want to leave resources that you may find helpful. One is an interview with Dr. Lorraine Day on Israeli News Live with Yana and Steve, titled Dr. Lorraine Day Tells About the Passing of the Noahide Laws. Also, you see this article link as to the letter I just shared with all of you. This is another video that was done by Anthony Patch and his wife Kathleen, and I will also leave that link below. We must understand that there have clearly been biblical instructions, laws, all the way back to Adam. We're not disputing that. There were instructions given to Adam. He was the first preacher of righteousness. We know Noah was the 8th preacher of righteousness under the Melchizedek priesthood. Yahusha became our high priest of the Melchizedek order and was from the tribe of Judah. The Melchizedek priesthood predated the Aaronic Levitical priesthood, and that is extremely important to know. That is a truth they don't want to admit, nor to acknowledge the difference between the Book of the Covenant and the Book of the Law, which was addressed somewhat in the letter an article we just read. Psalm 110:4 says, Yahweh has sworn and does not relent. You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. And that is in relation to Yahusha, Jesus the Messiah. Again, to understand deeper biblical concepts which are not even taught in most traditional church settings, you can watch my recently completed Priesthood series. That series will begin to teach you the meat of His Word and wean you off the milk. These end of days is not the time to be spoon-fed. We must devote time to studying His Word so that you can take ownership of biblical truths that will become living truth in your life. We all must be good Bereans and study these things out and see if they are so. Don't take my word for it. Don't take anyone's word for it. You must take responsibility and search these things out to see if they be so. May you take heed. The time is short and the deceptions around us are great. Here are the links to the series, the Priesthood series. I'll leave those links below, and if you go there directly, you can see they're numbered, and that's the sequence to watch them in. Again, I'm leaving you with Ezekiel 33:6. But if the watchman sees the sword coming, and shall not blow the ram's horn, and the people shall not be warned, and the sword comes and takes any being from among them, he is taken away in his crookedness, and his blood I require at the watchman's hand. So I'm sounding the shofar. It can be heeded or it cannot be heeded, but the shofar has been sound. So as watchmen, we are to sound the shofar at impending danger. This topic is one that many may slough off as insignificant. Doing so works in favor of the enemy and may cost you your very head, literally. After all, the Lubavitch Jews, the scribes and Pharisees of our day, just like it was in Yahushua's day, just celebrated their 40th anniversary of the 7 Noahide Laws, sheathed as Education Day in March 2018. In 2018, Israel just celebrated their 70th anniversary of being a man-made nation. Israel, the two sticks are becoming one. The northern tribe, house of Israel, and the southern tribe, house of Judah, will become one. And when they become one, that will be the true Israel that is gathered by Yahushua HaMashiach. That Israel will be the Messianic Israel, one house once again. Keep in mind the numbers 40 and the number 70 are extremely significant. So stay in prayer for those in Orthodox Judaism and the Chabad Lubavitch sect, that they see that it was Yahushua HaMashiach that came the first time, and he will come again. The one they are unknowingly or knowingly looking for is the anti-Mashiach or anti-Messiah. Stay in prayer for those caught up also in Christian Zionism. I've been there, done that. I now have eyes to see and ears to hear. Praise Yah. Because those individuals may have good intention, and they think they are supporting the true Israel, but they are being gravely deceived. So lastly, just stay in prayer. Shalom, and be watchful. And again, study as good Bereans, study these things out and see if they be so. Shalom.